We thank you for your Son. We thank you for the relationship that we have with you because of him, and that we can see in your scriptures who your people are and who you are and who you have always been. And this, as we study the book of Ezra tonight, that's no different. We can see and witness in our fingertips, in our hands, on our phones, so conveniently. We can study and come to know you through your words, and that is a marvelous thing that we thank you for. We thank you for all of us here as students and as teachers, that as we strive to grow closer to you, we are an encouragement to each other. We pray that we'll continue to be so, to stir each other up, but also to be an example of what a relationship with you looks like in our lives. It is in your Son's name, Jesus Christ, that we pray. Amen. Okay. Well, Ezra chapter 7, 8, 9, and 10. Again, a lot of content to cover if we were reading all of it. So we'll skip through and read a handful of passages that hopefully give us some context. Feel free, if you're familiar with something that jumps out to you as we're looking through this that is important to you, feel free to interrupt and share. But Ezra these chapters are an accounting of the second wave of return. The second group that's returning from exile, coming from Babylon, returning back to Jerusalem. So this is about, I think it's 80 years after the first group came back, about 60 years the temple's been done. So that first group was Zerubbabel, a lot bigger group, 49-ish thousand people, with everybody in servants coming back. This group's probably a lot smaller. There's some, we'll skip over some of the passages that include a lot of the names and counts and figures and summarize those, but if you go through and count up, and I didn't do this myself, I cheated. I didn't cheat. I used the resources that are at my fingertips, which is the power of the interwebs. It's not cheating. If you count up all the men listed there at the start of this section, there's 1,496 men. So add in spouses and some children, maybe 5,000-6,000-ish people this go around, all returning home, returning back to Jerusalem. Just again, context for what we're talking about. We're talking about a journey coming back and what they find when they return. It's takes about 4 months for them to get back. It's about a 4-month trek to get there. And again, at this point, they're returning home. Zerubbabel's completed the temple about 60 years, and they're looking about roughly 5,000-ish people coming back to Jerusalem. So interesting things about Ezra. I like Ezra. I think Nehemiah is similar in this, and it's, I think, one of the only two priests that write in the first person. It's kind of neat. Literally we're reading his own personal account of what's happening. I don't know, just interesting to me. May not be to you. And then, again, as we read through, I'll ask a handful of questions just for thought questions, but look for patterns, look for things that stick out to you, and we can share those. Was there a hand over there? John? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that those first 6 chapters is Ezra writing and giving an accounts between then and now. It's about a 60-year. Yeah, exactly. 80 total. So by the time they get back, it's been about 80 years. Yes, sir. Yes, it is. Yes, I believe so. All right, so we'll kick off and we'll read. So the first few verses there in chapter 7 are some of the lineage of Ezra. But it says, pick up in verse 6. It says, "This Ezra went up from Babylonia. He was a scribe, skilled in the law of Moses, that the Lord, the God of Israel, had given, and the king granted him all that he asked for. The hand of the Lord, his God, was on him." Verse 7, "And there went up also to Jerusalem in the 7th year of Artaxerxes the king some of the people of Israel, and some of the priests and the Levites and the singers and the gatekeepers and the temple servants. And Ezra came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was the 7th year of the king." So he departed on the first day of the first month and then arrived at the 5th month, so about a 4-month journey. "For on the first day of the first month he began to go up from Babylonia. And the first day, I just said that. And then verse 10, for Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord and to do it, and to teach his statutes and rules in Israel. So the king let him go. That's the King Artaxerxes. That's the son of King of Xerxes the first, who was the king when Esther, throughout Esther's time. But he gives authority to Ezra to leave, to go, to take this group. So the next section of verses there, 11 through 26, I'll try to summarize. And I had a whole nother paper that did that more succinctly than my notes, but I forgot it, so that's fine. I'll blame it on my right hand. But we see Ezra. So again, as we look at who is Ezra, he's a scribe. He's skilled in the law. He's the lineage there is he's descendant from Aaron, son of the chief priest. That's why we get that lineage, so we know a little more about him. But he is, there in verse 10, determined. He set his heart to study the law of the Lord, to do it, to teach his statutes and rules in Israel. So verses 11 through 26, we see this decree given, and it gives a lot of authority to Ezra. So it's not just, okay, let my people go. He is empowered to return and restore and uphold the laws of their people, of God, the laws of their God. He is empowered to return and establish governance over his people, and it allows him to do a whole lot of things in terms of managing funds and resources and money. It gives him a lot of authority. The king's decree there not just lets them go, but lets them return and establish authority. So we see some of that when they get back. They talk with the local Persian officials, and they give them the letter. You'll see that later. But they give them the letter from the king that gives them authority, and they support that. They recognize it's from the king. So it's more than just freedom. It's your exile has ended. You can return and restore your homeland. So it's a big, momentous occasion, similar as Zerubbabel did, obviously. So as they leave, how's Ezra taken? Well, again, as we look at Ezra, this is written from his perspective. How's he taken all of this? Are they running away, skipping, fleeing as fast as they can? Or I look at verses 27 and 28. Again, as I try to read through, I find myself doing it more with Old Testament stories, I think, often, because it helps me just center. But try to think of if this was me then, if I was there, if these things were being told to me, if I was empowered by the king that we had been under the rule of for so many generations and so many years, and God himself has then empowered me and promises to protect me and puts me in this position, and I'm given all of this authority. He responds beautifully, as I hope we would too. Verse 27, blessed be the Lord, the God of our fathers, who put such a thing as this into the heart of the king, to beautify the house of the Lord that is in Jerusalem, and who extended to me his steadfast love before the king and his counselors, and before all the king's mighty officers. I took courage, for the hand of the Lord my God was on me, and I gathered leading men from Israel to go up with me. Oh man, it just summarizes just how powerful, impactful, and amazing this is, and that Ezra, recognizes where this is coming from. That phrase, the hand of God, the hand of the Lord, that's one of the things as I read through all these chapters, I picked up on. I think in 7 and 8, it's like 6 times. Just in those 2 chapters, the hand of God. So there's no doubt in Ezra's mind, and shouldn't be in any of the people that are going with him, who's actually doing this. It's not by the marvelous grace of King Artaxerxes that they're being set free. It is God has caused this to happen. That's a recognition point for them, as it is for us in our own lives. Mr. John, and then Jordan.
Like you're talking about, he didn't really just jump in and assert himself.
Yeah.
He sort of, eased into the situation. Well, the only time he really jumped out and started really a point and saying, hey, you're going to do this, when he found out about that marriage situation. That's when he really started to make known his power.
Yeah, for sure. He does. Jordan?
So he didn't just really jump out and assert himself.
Yeah, there's a big level of patience. There's a big level of pause, appreciation, respect, like all of those things. It's not a pick it up and run. I'm now empowered. I'm in charge. But I appreciate that moment of reflection, of gratitude and appreciation and understanding of, I know where this came from. I know where this is coming from and where we're going and who's going to keep us as we go on that journey. Jordan? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah.
Still faithful to every promise he's made.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, because spoiler alert, when they get back, and I guess John spoiled it already. When they get back and there's a big problem with intermarriage, that there is a reason that is such a big deal, because this remnant that has been preserved through hundreds of years of exile, of abandonment, of Jerusalem being destroyed, the temple being destroyed, this remnant that is this jewel, this gem of purity that God has protected and restored and returned and is making great again. They return and see that being defiled. Oh, I mean, so 80 years ago, a big group of our people got to go home, and now I'm finally taking this group home to what has been restored, what has been being restored to our homeland, that God has preserved them, He's preserved us, and to get there and realize it's been being and has been defiled just breaks Ezra. We'll see that in chapter 9 as well. But again, and John mentioned it too, when we see that, we see some of those authorities given, as well as when they get home and they meet with the Persian officials, they give them the letter. But it's, I cheated again and used the resource I had before. So Ezra has religious authority, he's got administrative authority, he's got the ability to enforce laws, appoint judges, appoint magistrates, manage funds, resources, temple workers, all the people that are going with him. He's in charge of the whole party. Again, all of these things is much more than just freedom. It is you're free to go and restore what you had. So. God's hand acting there, and in chapter 7, there's several more in chapter 8 as well. Chapter 8 then goes, as they go off into the journey, there's an accounting. That's where the 1,496 men are listed, rounded out with families. There's a few thousand people that are heading back. And we see there in that's verses 1 through 14, verses 15 through 20. Ezra, they're gathered there at the river the river that runs to Ahava in verse 15. They camp 3 days. And he starts reviewing the people and the priests and all the lists, and he recognizes that there's none of the sons of Levi. There's none of the tribe of Levi to care for the temple. So again, there's some more administrative. He's calling for resources there, calling for people. They get a bunch of the sons of Mahli, M-A-H-L-I, there in verse 18. The son of Levi, the son of Israel. Then go namely Sherebiah and his sons and kinsmen, and a couple hundred people to come as temple servants. And then verse 21, 22, and 23. So they're gathered. They're still pretty close to Babylon. They haven't quite left yet. They're camped out by the river, making ready to make their departure. In verse 21 of chapter 8, then I proclaimed a fast there at the river Ahava. that we might humble ourselves before our God to seek from him a safe journey for ourselves, our children, and all our goods. For I was ashamed to ask the king for a band of soldiers and horsemen to protect us against the enemy on our way, since we had told the king, the hand of our God is for good on all who seek him, and the power of his wrath is against all who forsake him. So we fasted and implored our God for this, and he listened to our entreaty. So again, we see this moment of pause. We see some preparation, some thankfulness as they're getting ready to go, and he proclaims a fast to do what and why. I just thought this was neat. What's the fast for? What's it do? Why do people fast in general? Weight loss, calorie deficit, lack of food. It's a centering practice for in most cases. It's a practice that actively you eliminate something we normally focus on to sustain our bodies to refocus on something else. In this case, he proclaims a fast to recognize their dependence on the Lord. We might humble ourselves before our God. It's an act of focus, of recentering, of focus. And then as an entreaty to protect them on their journey. And why? What were they ashamed to ask for? Soldiers. Why would they be ashamed to ask for soldiers? They just got this letter of authority. They just got everything you could ever want. I like this, that this is a moment that, oh man, I've talked the talk. Now I better walk the walk. I told this king, don't worry about us. God's going to take care of us. Anybody who comes against us is not going to succeed. We're going to succeed because the Lord is with us. He's got us. We're good to go. And then you look out and you realize, I got 4 months going through a whole bunch of land, a whole bunch of marauders and bands of bandits and all sorts of things, and think, I told him we were good. I think we're good. So I like that. It's a human moment for me as I recognize, and there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of humility in recognizing he knows that there is going to be danger. He knows there's going to be peril, and he knows it would not be outside of his authority to go and ask for, hey, can you send us a band of soldiers to keep us safe? I mean, it wouldn't have been inappropriate per se, but he recognizes they have told them, Ezra has told him, they have proclaimed there in verse 22, the hand of our God is for good on all who seek him, and the power of his wrath is against all who forsake him. So I just thought that was neat. I like that. And for good reason, they fast, and God heard and listened to their entreaty, because we see there a few verses later, in verse 31 and 32, for good reason, because there was they departed from the river Ahava on the 12th day of the first month to go to Jerusalem, and the hand of our God was on us, and he delivered us from the hand of the enemy and from ambushes by the way. We came to Jerusalem, and there we remained 3 days. So there definitely was peril along the way that he protected them from. The section of verses we skipped over there, 24 to 30. Again, some more administrative wisdom. There's a little bit of authority being utilized. They're taking with them, not just people. They're taking with them a whole lot of resources as well. 650 talents of silver, 200 talents, and 100 talents of gold, or silver vessels, 200 talents, 100 talents of gold, 20 bowls of gold, worth 100 derricks, a whole lot of resources. Again, Ezra has been given the authority to manage those things. He splits them up across 12 leading priests, so that they are managing those things, and again, so that they can take them all the way back to Jerusalem and give them to the Lord. But again, procedure, it's a procedural note in my mind, but why would you do that? Why would you split it all up? Why not just put it in one wagon? Well, because you're going to be attacked by marauders and bandits and ambushes across the whole way, so you split up your resources for the journey. Again, just interesting contextual information for me. John? Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a common thing back in that time.
Yeah.
You faced that if you were out there and unprotected.
Absolutely. Which again is one of the reasons it wouldn't have been out of the question to consider some armed security as you're trekking across the countryside. Yeah, lots of peril over that 4-month journey, and again, I just all along the way, who brought them home? Who's doing all of this? Again, I mentioned them. I think it's 6 times that I saw. But in this chapter, verse 18, 22, and 31, every one of them gives credit where it should be. That verse 31, that the hand of our God was on us. Verse 22, that the hand of our God is for good, and verse 18, that the good hand of our God on us. They brought us a man of discretion. So again, they recognize and give credit where it's due every single time. Any comments or questions? So chapter 7 and 8, it's a bunch of preparation, a bunch of gathering peoples, splitting up your resources, getting ready to defend against ambushes, and then they make the journey, and they arrive there in Jerusalem. And when they get there, chapter 9, before we dig into that, anything? Okay. Oh, yes, sir.
I don't know if we call it backing up, but
Yeah.
I want to talk about Artaxerxes for a minute.
Yeah.
He tends to be overlooked because this guy's a very big, powerful king.
Yeah.
He's a big deal.
Yes.
And he worships a god called, I think it's Aurora Mazda or something is the name of the king, or the name of the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
verse 20, and whatever is required for the house of your God. I mean, it just goes on and on. And we get this impression sometimes that if somebody's not a believer, that they can't be a good person.
Yeah. We do that a lot, don't we? Man, we do that a lot. Very often for generations without even realizing that that's exactly what we're doing, is that we are judging and condemning based on somebody not seeing something the same way that I do, that has very little to do with the good virtues that are the foundation of being good people and seeking justice and doing good and loving thy neighbor and all of those things. So there's a lot to be appreciated in that. Yeah. Other than Ezra's own proclamation that it's because God made it happen. But yeah, I mean, because that's there. That at least that's what I got from. Where was that? There in that verse 27. That I mean, Ezra's proclamation there. That blessed be the Lord, the God of our fathers, who put such a thing as this into the heart of the king. I mean, for sure. Oh man, I love little nuggets like that, because it puts into context all of the things that we see throughout Israel's all through God's chosen people, their cycle of following and abandonment and their betrayal and then their loss and their return. All through this, we see God working to preserve that remnant. And again, I told you all when we went through it, I love the story of Hezekiah and Sennacherib and that whole scene, and that the pompous arrogance that Sennacherib has when he's writing. He sends the message to Hezekiah, and he's, who are all these gods of all these other nations that I destroyed? And we see God's response, and it is, who do you think you are? I am doing this. This is all part of I'm the one running the show. I've got all of you are just an instrument of my plan. You are just a tool. And then you get all the way to here and realize this is God working. This is Him. This is His power in effect, protecting what He has always promised. And you're absolutely right, Jordan, that's, I think, what we're supposed to see through all of this. That's why we have these things recorded, to see God's faithfulness is everlasting. His promises are true. His words are true. And we see that every single time. And I love that we see Ezra recognizing it as we go, that this is what the Lord is doing. This is incredible. That's cool. John.
God as God for all these people that He is dealing with at this time. Now, this isn't a God He's talking about. He's talking about God.
At the very least, it's an excellent example of someone displaying incredible tolerance for another's belief. At the very least, Artaxerxes, you're absolutely right. He's a big deal. He's a very, very powerful king. Is an incredible example of amazing tolerance and for another's belief that was very different. But he still is, and like I like the summary you went through. He's recognizing your God, the God of, and again, empowering Ezra to restore that is a lot bigger deal than they've ever had before. So it's not like when it's one dissimilarity in how they left Egypt, where they were chased after and sought after. They were not just leaving; they were leaving empowered to restore and return, which is a cool thing. All right. So chapter 9, was that a hand, Jordan? Okay. All right. So chapter 9, they get back. We'll read all of chapter 9. It's only 15 verses. So. After these things had been done, the officials approached me and said, "The people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the peoples of the land with their abominations, from the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. For they have taken some of their daughters to be wives for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy race has mixed itself with the peoples of the lands, and in this faithlessness the hand of the officials and chief men have been foremost. As soon as I heard this, I tore my garment and my cloak. I pulled my hair from my head and beard and sat appalled. And all who trembled at the words of God of Israel, because of the faithlessness of the returned exiles, gathered around me while I sat appalled until the evening sacrifice. And at the evening sacrifice I rose from my fasting, and with my garment and my cloak torn, I fell on my knees and spread out my hands to the Lord my God, saying, O my God, I am ashamed and blush to lift my face to you. My God, for our iniquities have risen higher than our heads, and our guilt has mounted up to the heavens. For from the days of our fathers to this day we have been in great guilt. And for our iniquities, we, our kings and our priests, have been given into the hand of the kings of the lands, to the sword, to captivity, to plundering, and to utter shame, as it is today. But now, for a brief moment of favor has been shown by the Lord our God, to leave us a remnant, to give us a secure hold within this holy place, that our God may brighten our eyes and grant us a little reviving in our slavery, for we are slaves. Yet our God has not forsaken us in our slavery, but has extended to us his steadfast love before the kings of Persia to grant us some reviving, to set up the house of our God, to repair its ruins, and to give us protection in Judea and Jerusalem. And now, O our God, what shall we say after this? For we have forsaken your commandments, which you commanded by your servants, the prophets, saying, the land that you are entering to take possession of it, it is a land impure, with the impurity of the people of the lands and with their abominations that have filled it from end to end with their uncleanness. Therefore, do not give your daughters to their sons, neither take their daughters for your sons, and never seek their peace or prosperity, that you may be strong and eat good of the land and leave it for an inheritance for your children forever. And after all that has come upon us for our evil deeds and for our great guilt, seeing that you, our God, have punished us less than our iniquities deserved, and have given us such a remnant as this, shall we break your commandments again and intermarry with the peoples who practice these abominations? Would you not be angry with us until you consumed us, so that there should be no remnant, nor any to escape? O Lord, the God of Israel, you are just, for we are left a remnant that has escaped, as it is today. Behold, we are before you in our guilt, for none can stand before you because of this. So to get home, oh man, again, just put ourselves in this group's shoes. This few thousand people, they get home after 4 months. The letter they got from the king works. They give it to the Persian officials. They're restored. And the leaders that are there of that first group that's been there for 80 years, rebuilt the temple, they come and tell you, we've defiled the very thing that has been saved. And we see Ezra's reaction. We see his grief. Tears his clothes, pulls his hair. Why is this such a big deal? Why is it such why is there such a response like this? And we've talked about it already. It's a big deal because they finally come home, and that remnant, that purity, that perfection, the jewel that God has protected and kept and secured and restored, it has been corrupted, has been destroyed. And we see just a beautiful and painful prayer to the Lord from Ezra, of just despair, of sorrow, of recognizing what a horrible thing that they have done, that he recognizes that this was our chance. This was our chance. We finally home. We're finally restored, and you've relented from our exile. You've given some reviving there from the kings of Persia in verse 9, and just there's a little bit of light, and we've destroyed it. It's just thinking about it like that when we have those moments ourselves in our own lives, when we come to the full realization of our own sins, of our own sorrowful state, do we respond this way? Sometimes we do, and it's a hard thing. It's a hard life lesson. It's a hard thing to deal with on our own or with those that we love and that love us, but it's even scarier when we don't, when we recognize our own position and we ignore it, or we make excuses, or we abandon it. So as hard as this has to be for Ezra, as sorrowful and agonizing that it's got to be for these people, and we see chapter 10, we see their response. It's not just Ezra. It's not so many times we see this type of response from God's prophets and God's priests and God's people who have been sent as teachers and messengers. We see this response from them, and we see the nations not respond or not listen or not heed the warnings or not pay attention or not repent. I think of Jonah and Nineveh. I mean, he wasn't expecting repentance out of the Ninevites, but they heard of their sin and they were convicted, and we see the same thing here in chapter 10 as well, this nation's response. But again, it's a lot of me talking, but welcome any comments or concerns on that. Not a lot of, Jordan.
So, knowing historically that non-Jews have successfully become faithful servants of God in the history of Israel, I think we might, in this case, be able to see that there's a little more than just intermarrying. Like with, donkey Balaam? Yeah. When he convinced Israel basically to become intertwined with the women of whatever that country was. The name wasn't really after. And that was bringing in idolatry. We see, on the other hand, with like Ruth, the Moabite, we abandon all the false gods and that worship, and it came to live in Israel. We know the line of David goes to that. We have these contrasting examples. So I think in this case, we're in that other position. Well, it's not the people that are intermarrying with the Israelites are abandoning the evil to seek God. It's that is entering the people again of Israel, that idolatry around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reason for the response is not just interracial marriage. The reason for the response is they know their own history, and they know time after time after time after time, God has preserved, protected, and restored, and they've thrown it away. And you see God preserve, protect, and restore them to their home, and you see them throwing it away. It's not just the intermarrying that is throwing it away. It's yet again an abandonment of what they have been told to do by the Lord, the instruction that they've been given. So that's why it's heartbreaking. So it could have been any number of particular sins or particular abandonments, but the response would have been the same. And again, it's as I think about myself and my own life, as I go through as we go through our own times of restoration and restoring and return to when we have been away. It is a miserable feeling when you recognize where you were, and then if you've fallen or strayed again, or those recurring sins that we deal with and struggle with on our own, are that there's a reason that they make us feel so bad about ourselves. There's a reason they induce such guilt, because we know the facts. We know that God is permanent. We know that it's there, but we still struggle, and that's we come to the realization that we can't do it. We're not enough. And then again, of course we're not. That's the point. That's why we have this. That's why we have Jesus. Coming to that realization and recognition that we are truly and solely dependent upon our relationship with the Lord is not a weakening. It is a strengthening. It is not a moment of weakness to recognize that we're not enough. It is a moment of maturity to recognize that that's why I'm here. That's why Jesus is there. That's why he is here for us. That's why we have this relationship with the Lord. That's why we have the relationships we do here in this life as a family of believers, diligently seeking to be disciples of Christ. I mean, that's why. And it's powerful to me to recognize that struggle, those aha moments, those epiphanies that we can have with ourselves and with each other have been happening with God's people forever, because we're still people, and we constantly need reminders. That's why we have, and have always, God's people have always had memorials. That's why God has always instructed his people to do things that induce questioning and induce the question of, why do we do this? And the answer is because of what the Lord has done for us. We see that all throughout the Old Testament, feasts and memorials and all of those things, monuments and altars and stacks of stones and so many things that when you stumble across a stack of 12 stones next to a river, why is that there? So you'll tell your children, I know why that's there. That's there because it's a reminder of what God did for us here. So, Lord's Supper. Why do we have that memorial again to remind us what God has done for us? It's comforting to me to recognize that God's people have always needed reminders. So the fact that I need reminders is not a new struggle. That nothing new under the sun means there is no hardship, struggle, or sin that I can deal with and have trouble with that is new or unique and has not been conquered before. That means nobody is ever truly alone in a struggle. Again, a lot of me talking, rambling, but I think about those things a lot. So, chapter 10, we see the people's response. They thankfully recognize. Ezra's response is appropriate. It is just, and they wept bitterly. In verse 1. Verse 3 says, "Therefore let us make a covenant with our God to put away all the wives and their children according to the counsel of my Lord, and of those who tremble at the commandment of our Lord. Let it be done according to the law. Arise, for it is your task, and we are with you. Be strong and do it." And then Ezra arose, made leading priests and Levites and all Israel take an oath. Excuse me. Take an oath that they would do as had been said. So they took the oath. So they respond. They respond well and make a covenant to return to what God had called them to do. So next few verses there, 6 through 13. "And Ezra withdrew from the house of God and went up to the chamber of Jehonan, the son of Eliashib. And there he spent the night, neither eating bread nor drinking water, for his mourning over the faithlessness of the exiles. And a proclamation was made throughout Judah and Jerusalem to all returned exiles that they should assemble at Jerusalem, and that if anyone did not come within 3 days, by order of the officials and the elders, all his property should be forfeited, and he himself banned from the congregation of the exiles. So then all the men of Judah and Benjamin assembled at Jerusalem within 3 days. It was the 9th month, the 20th day of the month. And all the people sat in the open square before the house of the Lord, trembling because of this matter and because of the heavy rain. Again, just an interesting contextual note. Everybody, family meeting right now. You got 3 days to get here. If you don't get here, all your stuff's getting taken away and you're banned. So it's super important. Rain or shine, I don't care. Get out of here. So they're standing out there in the rain. Anyway, John, I saw your hand. I'm going to read the next couple verses and I'll come back to you. Verse 10, "And Ezra, the priest, stood up and said to them, 'You have broken faith and married foreign women, so increased the guilt of Israel. Now, then, make confession to the Lord and the God of our fathers, and do his will. Separate yourselves from the peoples of the land and from foreign wives.' Then all the assembly answered in a loud voice, 'It is so, we must do as you have said. But the people are many, and it is a time of heavy rain. We cannot stand in the open, nor is this a task for 1 day or for 2, and we have greatly transgressed in this matter.'" So again, a practical response, but you're right. You're absolutely right. We're going to do what you say. We've made this covenant. We're going to keep the promise. We're going to do it. But it's cold and it's rainy, and it's a lot of people. It's a really big deal. It's going to take more than a day or two. And they break the rest of those verses there. They break it up. Everybody go back to your homes, and your individual towns and officials, leaders of your little towns will come, and you'll deal with it on a town-by-town basis. But again, practically, we see them do exactly what they make the covenant to do. They go through all the men, and then verses 18 through the end of the chapter is a long list of all of those that found guilty of that. John, yes, sir.
We're going to point out that now some of these have been in this situation for quite some time.
Oh, yeah. It's been a while.
They had families developed. They had children.
Yeah.
So this has been something that's working with some of these for Very long time.
Yeah, I did try to figure out how many people we're talking about, because it's so that first group that came over, 49-ish thousand folks. They aren't all still right there. They're all not still like in Jerusalem. They're all not right there. We mentioned all the people in Judah and Benjamin coming back for this town hall meeting. It's very likely that most of that first big group, they went back to their homes, and not everybody lived in Jerusalem. It's surrounding towns and cities, so it's not talking about. I don't think that we're looking at 49,000 people plus 80 years of children. I don't think it's a group that big, but we're still talking, if we're talking about the 5,000 or so that are here now, and then, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10,000-ish, so maybe 10 to 15. There wasn't any other scholarly examples I could find that gave a better accounting other than to, ballpark a number of, we're still talking, 10-ish, 12-ish thousand people coming together. But we see there that was, and I lost which verse it said. Again, just an interesting contextual note, that it was the 20th, in verse 9, it was the 20th day of the month of the 9th month. And then I think they all go back to their homes, and it talks about going through all of this through the first day of the 10th month. They sat down to examine the matter, and by the first day of the first month, so October 1 to January 1, or maybe January 1, yeah. It's like three months it took to go through this matter. So to John's point, we're not talking about a couple of families. We're talking about, this has been a long time of this happening, and it took 3 months to sort through each individual family and come up with this list there in verse 18 through the rest of the chapter. So again, it was something, they made that covenant to do so, and to work through that, and they followed through to restore. Sorry. If you move in the wrong way, it's like lightning. It's not fun. Yeah. And general shoulder surgery, 0 out of 10. Would not recommend. Not fun. But so we again, that's the end of the chapter there. But we see them follow through on their covenant that they made to restore and return to what they had been instructed to do. Any takeaways or lingering thoughts from anybody? Yes, sir.
59 years, I've seen people give up smoking for the Lord, or drinking, or bad language, or pornography, or immodest dress, whatever their commitment to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's somebody here that's seen it and witnessed it. That's pretty rare. When you go up to somebody and say, you do not have a right to be married to the person that you're currently with.
Yeah.
You need to separate and annul your marriage or whatever. I've never seen it. I've seen it where I know what I should do, but I can't do it, and I'm not going to do it. And that is commitment.
Yeah, we talk about. Yeah, I mean, in this context, we talk about intermarrying in this covenant. They're going to put them away, and man, that's hard to. I mean, a lot of relationships, families, well-established things that are being separated because they recognize they had strayed. That is a powerful commitment. So, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Have a good rest of the week.